The crowd laughed. Not a polite chuckle. Not a nervous laugh. The kind of laugh people make when they are absolutely certain someone has just made the dumbest mistake of their life. Standing near the back of the auction yard was 72-year-old Walter Briggs, a weathered farmer whose faded overalls looked older than some of the people attending the sale. In front of him sat a fire-warped steel safe. Its paint was blistered black. The handle was melted. The metal door looked twisted beyond repair. To everyone else, it was nothing but a heavy piece of junk rescued from the ruins of a hotel that had burned down 6 months earlier. But Walter kept staring at it. And when the auctioneer asked for bids, Walter quietly raised his hand. $90. The crowd erupted with laughter. What nobody knew was that before sunrise the next morning, half the town would be standing outside Walter's farmhouse. Because inside that burned safe was something nobody expected. Something worth far more than money. The old Riverside Hotel had once been the pride of the county. Built in 1912, it sat beside the river and welcomed travelers for generations. Then one winter night, a fire swept through the building. By the time firefighters controlled the flames, most of the structure was destroyed. The owners never rebuilt. Eventually, the remaining contents were sold at auction. Furniture. Light fixtures. Old signs. Boxes of damaged records. And one massive safe recovered from the manager's office. Nobody could open it. Several locksmiths had tried. The combination was gone. The locking mechanism appeared ruined by heat. Most people assumed the contents had burned anyway. So when auction day arrived, nobody paid much attention to it. Except Walter. As the bidding continued, he stood quietly with his hands in his pockets. People knew him as a hardworking farmer who rarely wasted money. He wasn't wealthy. In fact, after several difficult harvests, money had become tighter than ever. Which made his interest in the safe even stranger. His neighbor, Earl, nudged him. "Walter, what are you looking at that thing for?" Walter smiled slightly. "Just curious." "Curious enough to buy 2,000 pounds of scrap metal?" Walter didn't answer. Because he remembered something nobody else did. Something he had heard over 50 years earlier. When Walter was 16, he worked odd jobs around town. One summer, he helped maintain the grounds at Riverside Hotel. Back then, the hotel manager was an elderly man named Henry Lawson. Henry loved telling stories. Most were probably exaggerated. But one story stayed with Walter for decades. Henry often claimed that the hotel's safe held more than cash. According to him, the original owner hid something inside shortly before he died. Whenever people asked what it was, Henry would laugh and refuse to answer. Most assumed he was joking. But Walter never forgot. And now, standing in front of the burned safe all these years later, that memory returned. Maybe it meant nothing. Maybe it was just an old man's tale. But for $90, Walter was willing to take the chance. The auctioneer looked around. $90. Any higher bids? Silence. Nobody wanted the ruined safe. Sold. The hammer came down. Laughter spread through the crowd again. One man shouted, "Hope there's gold bars in there, Walter." More laughter followed. Walter simply nodded and arranged transportation. The safe was loaded onto a flatbed trailer and delivered to his farm before sunset. His daughter, Claire, arrived shortly afterward. She stared at the enormous blackened safe sitting inside the barn. "Dad, please tell me you didn't spend money on that." Walter grinned. "I did." Claire rubbed her forehead. "Why?" "Call it a feeling." She sighed. "You've always trusted your feelings. And they've been right a few times." Claire laughed. "Not enough times." That evening, after dinner, Walter returned to the barn alone. Rain tapped softly against the roof. A single work light illuminated the safe. The damaged steel looked even worse up close. Most people would have given up immediately. But Walter had spent his life repairing broken equipment. He knew patience often mattered more than strength. For hours he examined every inch. The hinges. The lock. The warped edges. Finally, he noticed something unusual. The heat hadn't damaged the entire door evenly. One section appeared slightly separated from the frame. Just enough to create a narrow gap. Walter fetched tools. A pry bar. A hammer. Several steel wedges. Slowly, carefully, he began working. Minutes became hours. His hands ached. Sweat rolled down his face despite the cool night air. Then suddenly. Clank. Something shifted. Walter froze. The door moved. Only half an inch. But it moved. His heart started pounding. He inserted another wedge. Applied more pressure. The metal groaned. Then the safe door swung open. For several seconds, Walter simply stared. The interior wasn't empty. A small metal box rested on the bottom shelf. Protected inside the larger safe. Walter carefully lifted it out. Unlike the outer safe, the smaller box had survived remarkably well. Its lock had already broken from heat exposure. The lid opened easily. Inside were dozens of yellowed papers tied together with faded ribbon. Walter frowned. No gold. No cash. No jewels. Just documents. For a moment, disappointment crept in. Then he unfolded the first page. And everything changed. The documents dated back more than a century. Property records. Letters. Maps. Legal agreements. As Walter read further, he realized what he was holding. The papers belonged to the founder of Riverside Hotel. More importantly, they proved ownership of a large parcel of riverfront land that had been disputed for decades. The town believed the ownership records were lost forever. Without documentation, the land's legal status remained unresolved for generations. But here they were. Perfectly preserved. And hidden inside the safe all along. Walter continued reading. Near the bottom of the box lay a sealed envelope. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter. The founder explained everything. Years before his death, he discovered errors in local property records. Afraid the documents would be destroyed or manipulated, he locked originals inside the safe. He intended to retrieve them later. But he died unexpectedly before revealing their location. The secret vanished with him. Until now. The next morning, Walter contacted the county clerk. At first, nobody believed him. Then officials examined the documents. Historians arrived. Surveyors arrived. Lawyers arrived. Within days, experts confirmed the papers were authentic. News spread rapidly. Reporters came from neighboring counties. People who laughed at Walter's purchase suddenly wanted interviews. The burned safe became the most famous object in town. But the biggest surprise came weeks later. The recovered records allowed ownership questions surrounding the riverfront property to be settled permanently. Part of the land was eventually designated for a public heritage park. The project attracted tourism and investment. The town benefited enormously. And officials publicly credited Walter for preserving a piece of local history that might otherwise have remained lost forever. One afternoon, months later, Walter sat on his porch watching the sunset. A reporter asked the question everyone wanted answered. When you bought that safe, did you honestly expect to find something valuable inside? Walter smiled. Depends on what you mean by valuable. The reporter laughed. No, really. Walter looked toward the river. I thought maybe there was a chance. A chance at treasure? Walter shook his head. Most people hear the word treasure and think about money. He paused. But sometimes the most valuable things are the things that tell us who we are. The reporter remained silent. Walter continued. If those papers had stayed hidden, part of this town's story would have disappeared forever. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The crowd at the auction saw only a burned safe. A ruined object. A worthless mistake. Walter saw possibility. Not certainty. Just possibility. And that was enough. Because sometimes the difference between a fool and a visionary is simple. A fool sees value where none exists. A visionary sees value where nobody else bothers to look. And on that rainy night in an old farm barn, an aging farmer opened a safe everyone had forgotten. What he found wasn't gold. It wasn't diamonds. It wasn't stacks of cash. It was something rarer. A lost piece of history. And it all began with a $90 bid that made an entire auction laugh. Until they realized the old farmer had gotten the last laugh after all.